Welcome to Bayou Time. I'm Jacob Dagate, and it's now my pleasure to be joined by United States Senator Bill Cassidy. Senator, thank you very much for joining us. We certainly appreciate having you on today.
Hey, Jacob, thank you for having me on. I appreciate the chance to be with you.
All right. I know one thing that you've been working very hard on and being involved with is the infrastructure bill that's going to go for infrastructure, investment, and jobs. Can you tell us, some benefit that this area in South Louisiana can see from that bill?
South Louisiana will really benefit from this bill. Of course, there's the kind of top line numbers, $110 billion for roads and bridges. Louisiana will get about 5.8 or 9 billion of that, 1.2 billion than we ordinarily would get. Every region of our state needs roads and bridges. But there's also $50 billion for resiliency, of which 17 billion is going to the Army Corps of Engineers. And of that, several billion are going for coastal restoration. I smile. For some reason, I've been criticized for being involved in this process. But because I was involved in this process, the Army Corps of Engineers is directed to prioritize for coastal restoration those states that have been hit by natural disasters in the last 6 years. That doesn't say Louisiana in the bill, but it effectively says Louisiana. Our state will be prioritized in terms of coastal restoration projects. There's also 3.5 billion going to FEMA for flood mitigation. And then I think I know that many towns in our state have problems with sewer and water. There's 50 billion going nationwide to help communities upgrade their sewer and water systems. Now, Louisiana will get over 300 million this coming year in a revolving fund to help us. There's also $500 million if a community wants to take its storm drainage system and make it bigger, so that if they get a big rain, it's less likely to overwhelm and less likely to flood. There's $9.5 billion for ports and waterways, think Port Pouchon or St. Mary's Parish. And I can keep going, but there is about $500 billion that's going to help our country in ways such as I am describing.
And obviously in this area, another big project out there that we're trying hard for is Morganza to the Gulf. The project, the Hurricane Levee Protection System. Is this something, or is this bill something that can really give that project a big boost in the arm?
Absolutely. Morganza to the Gulf is well positioned for this. The Army Corps of Engineers has to put out their work plan within 60 days of the law being signed, the president signing the law. So if you've got your kind of project all lined up, you're more likely to be funded by the Army Corps. Clearly, Morganza to the Gulf is all lined up. There's been local input, local match, the engineering has been done, etc. So I think Morganza to the Gulf is extremely well positioned to compete for these dollars.
Okay, now for concerns about whether or not, or do they have the money to pay for this, how will it be paid for, and will there be any increase into the national deficit?
We can credibly say it's paid for. Now, by the way, some of the critics say that's not true, so I'll explain. Half of it is paid for in a way that we knew that the Congressional Budget Office would give us credit for. Yep, that abides by our rules, boom, it's paid for. Half of it is paid for in a way that we knew their rules wouldn't allow, but common sense tells you it's paid for. For example, Congress has already appropriated money for states to give the unemployed supplemental payments. Not all that money is going to be used. Congress has appropriated it, but not all the money has been used. And so what we did is took that money that's already been appropriated, $53 billion, which is not being used, we repurposed it over here to pay for these construction projects. It was before that we were paying people when they weren't working. Now we're paying to create jobs so that people can work. That's $53 billion right there. There's about another $150 billion similarly that we're repurposing from already appropriated money. The second way I think I can say it's paid for is that the Wharton School of Business, very famous, did an analysis over 30 years. Now, Congressional Budget Office can only look over 10 years, but Wharton looked over 30. And that acknowledges it takes some time for infrastructure to be built, but that the benefit goes on for decades. They found at the end of 30 years, because of this infrastructure plan, the economy grows more, and therefore, because it grows more, we collect more taxes, and it reduces the national debt. It reduces the national debt at the end of 30 years. Last thing I would say, is it more expensive or less expensive to do coastal restoration now or to wait for 15 more years when more of our coastline has melted away? More expensive or less expensive to repair a bridge now or to wait until it falls down? To ask those questions begs the answer. We cannot not afford to do this plan.
Of course, COVID is one thing that's dominated the conversation over the past year or so. We've seen recently that the Pfizer vaccine has been FDA approved, no longer just the emergency authorization. Can you tell us your thoughts on what that will do to help get people vaccinated throughout the community?
Yeah, I hope it helps a heck of a lot. There were some people nervous because it was still emergency use authorization. Now FDA has given it full approval. We've had over a year's experience with it. We've seen that it has been safe and effective. Folks like President Trump, ex-President Trump have been vaccinated, and President Biden has been vaccinated. They're still doing pretty well, best I can tell. And so hopefully people are reassured. One thing we know is that the people who are dying 99% of the time have not been vaccinated. That's an important fact. If you want to protect yourself from some terrible hospitalization ending in death, please be vaccinated.
Okay. Now, one of the things we saw yesterday, Louisiana State University has come out. I know that it's a big impact to this area. That their football team, they've come out and announced that to be required to enter the stadium, you either have to have a negative test within the past 72 hours or show that you have been vaccinated. Can you give us your thoughts on the school requiring that requirement?
Yeah, so when I go to Tiger Stadium, I'm kind of sitting like this, and there's somebody just in front of me and just behind me. And we're all screaming and yelling and go Tigers. That clearly is a risk of spreading the virus. The first big super spreader event was in a choir practice, and people were singing. As they sang, obviously they were spreading virus, and about 17 people or something like that got infected. So I think LSU is following the science, recognizing that if you're out there yelling, you're spreading virus. If you're infected, you can infect others. That's not good. So they're trying to protect the community.
Okay, and we've seen some businesses, hospitals, particularly for their nurses, now requiring employees to be vaccinated. We do have, now that there is an FDA approval on one of the vaccines, what's your thoughts on businesses requiring their employees or universities particularly requiring their students to be vaccinated?
They've been doing that forever with other vaccines. You cannot enroll in elementary school unless you've been vaccinated for measles, mumps, rubella, pertussis, diphtheria, hepatitis B, hepatitis A, and other things. You can't enroll in LSU, Nichols, you name it, unless you've similarly been vaccinated. You can't join the military unless you've been vaccinated for hepatitis B and other vaccines. So this is kind of consistent with public health laws that we've been living with for a long time. So those businesses are deciding that it's safer for their patients, for example, that nurses and doctors and nurses' aides be vaccinated. And the way you look at it, if you want to go to a hospital and do you want your nurses to potentially be infected or not? Of course, you want them not to be infected. I think that's the hospital's kind of thinking about it. We want everybody everybody vaccinated to protect our patients.
All right, Senator, let me switch gears just a little bit and go out to, across the country, across the world. In Afghanistan, we see the evacuation process taking place with the Taliban quickly taken over most of that country, and the United States struggling to get people out of there. Can you tell us, give your thoughts on what's going on in Afghanistan?
First, I want to thank everyone that served in Afghanistan, in the armed forces or on the clandestine services. Your service kept our country safe. Your service led to the degrading of Al-Qaeda and the killing of Osama bin Laden. And what President Biden has done now does not diminish the value or how noble your service was and is for those who are still there. Secondly, President Biden clearly made a huge mistake. I think he made a mistake in withdrawing. We only had about 2,500 troops there. We were maintaining a whole country with 2,500 troops. That's pretty cheap in order to continue the international fight against terrorism, to have a listening station on China and Iran and even Russia, and to be able to stage operations against enemies that might otherwise attack us. But he made the decision to pull out. Unfortunately, the way he did that has led to what the scenes we're having now. For those old enough to remember, it is like the Saigon moment, when the United States was pulling out of South Vietnam because the government fell. Unfortunately, in Saigon, there were no Americans. Unfortunately, in Kabul, there are Americans, and they may be trapped behind enemy lines, so to speak. President Biden has made a series of terrible decisions and terrible mistakes, and we're paying the price for it.
All right. Now, do you think that this will have a price that we pay throughout, in the future when we talk about how our allies will support us and whether or not, our word will mean anything to them?
I think that people are going to look at President Biden's foreign policy from here on out and really question his judgment. And I understand that, and they should. But frankly, I'm a Republican. I'm thinking we should vote Republican next time, have a Republican president. I think at that point our foreign allies would be more reassured.
All right. Well, we certainly appreciate your thoughts. And again, Senator, thank you for taking the time to join us. We certainly appreciate it.
Thank you, Jacob.
All right. Stay tuned for more right here on HTV.